Alright, so this lesson I would like to show everyone how to convert from fractions to decimal and decimals to fractions. So let's starting from decimals to fractions first. Alright, so let's start with the first example. If I have a number 0.6, how do I convert this one into a fraction? Alright, so the first step you do need to do is you look at how many number of decimal places used for the decimal numbers. So what we need to do is we need to count the number of decimal place used. And this is really important for us to decide which number to divide later on. So we count the decimal places used. Alright, so for this question here, 0.6 is only one decimal places. Alright, then after we finish that, what we need to do is move on to, this will tell you how many what is the number of zeros you must place in the denominator. So this is the number of zeros, alright, that you must place in the denominator. Alright, so that tells you that if I have a number 0.6, there's only one decimal place. So if I want to convert it from 0.6 to a fraction, then I'm just going to take the number 6 here. And then I'm going to divide this number by 10 because 10 has one number of 0. And then one decimal place means one number of 0. And that gives you some ideas. If I have one number, we divide it by 10. If we have two decimal places, then we divide it by 100 because 2 represent two zeros. So if it's 3 decimal places, we're going to divide the number by 1,000. Alright, so that's what we need to do. Basically, this is the idea. Now, once you finish that, what we need to do is we need to simplify the fraction if required, okay? Not every fraction you can simplify, but if you can simplify a certain fraction, then you need to do it. So it does depend on what fractions you get. So for example, this question here, we get 6 over 10. We can simplify this fraction. We can divide both the top numerator and denominator by the highest common factor, and in this case, divided by 2. So we're going to get 3 over 10 as the final answer. Now that's the way to do it without using a calculator. If you do use a calculator to convert from decimals to fraction, then it's going to be really easy. We just use the SD button on the calculator. Then you can the calculator will automatically convert the decimals to fractions and also fractions to decimals. However, this lesson we're focusing on how to do it manually. Alright, so this is the first example. Alright, so what about if we have a number that's, say 2 decimal places, 0.64. Alright, so we have 2 decimal places, and according to the rule here, then what we need to do is we're going to divide 64 by 100 because 100 has 2 zeros. And then once you finish that, what we need to do then is we simplify this answer here. Alright, so hopefully you can find the highest common factor between 64 and 100, which is equal to 4. You can try to do this division by 2 first, and then maybe try to divide by 2 again, alright? So 64 divided by 4 is 16, and 100 divided by 4 is 25. So that gives you the answer for the second example. Alright, so that should be quite easy. I don't see the hard part with this, this type of question here. So if you do get a question like this, it's quite easy to convert it. Alright, so how about this question here? How about question C? What happens if we have like a really small number, 0.00012? Something like this, right? Even if it's a very small number, that's okay. All you have to do again is just count the number of decimal places. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 decimal places, which means we're going to divide a number with 5 zeros, right? So let's start. We're going to use 12, and we're going to divide it by 5 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that becomes 100,000. So we divide this number by 100,000. Now once you finish that, we can simplify the answer. Obviously, we can do it, step by step if you want. We can divide it by 2 first. That gives us 6 over, that's 100,000 divided by 2 is 50,000. And we can keep dividing this number by 2. So that gives us 3 over 25,000. All right, and that becomes the answer. Okay, now at this stage, you don't need to know how to convert recurring decimals to fractions, but later on it is required to do that. I just want to show you an example. How do I convert a recurring decimals to a fraction? All right. So say for example, if we have a 0.6 recurring, how do we convert this one into a fraction? Now, some student maybe already know 0.6 recurring is equal to 2 over 3, because this is such a common one. All right, it's really common to do, and so you know the answer is equal to 2 over 3. Then what about if I don't use 0.6 recurring, if I use 0.6 let's just do 0.62 recurring. How about this one here? How do I convert this one into fractions? All right, so you do need to use something called, in the later stage, you're going to use something called algebra to work out the answers here. So I'm just going to show you the steps here to do it. All right, so let's just use the space here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let x equals to 0.62626262 dot. That's the 0.62 recurring. All right, once we finish that, we just count the number of decimal places. It's 1 and 2. So 2 decimal places means 100. So this time I'm just going to do 100x. So we times everything by 100. So you're going to times that 0.626262 by 100 to get to this result here. And then what do you get? You get 62.626262 dot after you times everything by 100. Now, hopefully you can see from here, then, if we try to subtract 100 by x, so that 100x minus x is equal to 99x, right? We've got 99x. So if we do this subtraction here, then we can subtract that 62.626262 by 0.626262 and goes on. So as you can see, all of those cancel out. Just because, the decimal numbers here at the end, they all minus each other and they'll become 0. And then 62 minus 0 is equal to 62. So now, if you divide both sides by 99, you get 62 over 99. And yeah, that's the answer. That 62 over 99 is equal to 0.6262626262 and goes on forever. All right, so that's the way to do it. Now at this stage, you don't need to know how to do this type of question, but eventually you need to know how to do it later on. All right, so this is decimals to fraction. Now, how do I convert from fraction to decimals? Fractions to decimals is slightly harder. All right, it is slightly harder than the decimals to fractions. All right, so I'll show you a few steps so you can follow to do it without using a calculator. So fraction to decimal. All right, so how do we convert from fraction to decimal? Depends on the case, all right? The first case is if the denominator is a power of 10, then we can simply change the fraction directly to a decimal from your knowledge of its place value. So for example, if we have something like, 23 over 100, all right, 23 over 100, then we can change that directly into 0.23. We just know the number of decimal places is 1 and 2. All right, and then 100 means we've got 2 zeros. And that 2 zeros means 2 decimal places. All right, it's pretty straightforward. So that example is really easy, which just depends on your knowledge of the place values, and if the denominator is a power of 10, then we can do the question quite easily. So if I have 46 over 1,000, then you will see here, well, 3 zeros. And 3 zeros means 3 decimal places, right? So the answer will be 0.046. 3 decimal places, 1, 2, and 3, and you finish the answer there. So that's pretty easy. All right, if you know the knowledge about the place values, and then if the question is giving you as denominator is a power of 10. All right, so this is what happens if it's a power of 10. So if the denominator, all right, is a power of 10. All right, so an example would be like 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, and it goes on. All right, a factor of a power of 10. All right, so that's the first case. Now, what happens if the denominator is not a power of 10? Then what we need to do is to try to find an equivalent fraction for which the denominator is a power of 10. All right, then we can convert it into the decimals. So it's like, this question here. So let's just say if the denominator is not a power of 10, all right, then what we need to do is we find, all right, or we try to convert an equivalent, then we find an equivalent fraction for which the denominator is a power of 10, all right, equivalent fraction for which the denominator is a power of 10. All right, so it's still pretty special. Not every single time you can change that. All right, so let's just put this one into an example. So for example, if I have a question like, say 3/20. All right, if it's 3/20. Now 20 is not a power of 10, but what we can do is we can times 20 by 5 and times the numerator by 5. And then by doing that, you can see that gives us 15/100. And then that just becomes 0.15. Really easy. All right, so let's try another example here. I have 41/250, for example. All right, now obviously 250 is not a power of 10, but we can change that 250 by multiplying everything by 4. Then you will see that 250 times by 4 is equal to 1,000. All right, and then 41 times by 4 is 164. All right, so once you finish that, then you get to the point where, okay, then the answer will be, 3 decimal places, because we'll have 3 zeros. So that becomes 0.164. All right, so that's what we do. So this is the second case. If the denominator is not power of 10, then we can find an equivalent fraction for which the denominator is a power of 10. All right, so we do have a last case, right? The last case is what happened like both methods failed, right? You don't have a power of 10, you can't make a denominator into a power of 10, and then what do we do? All right, there's a method that always works, all right? There's one method that always works that applies to any fractions, is where you just do division, all right? So you just simply divide the numerator by denominator, simply using either short division or using the long division. So divide the numerator, all right, by the denominator. I guess this is the most straightforward method. Does apply to every question, but sometimes it's not the quickest way to do it. So let me just give you a question here. So for example, we have 4/7. Well, 7 is not a power of 10, and you can't really make a 7 as a power of 10. So what do? Well, let's just use a long division, because we can't use a calculator, all right? If we don't use a calculator, then we have to manually calculate what is the answer equals to. And sometimes you do get recurring decimals, or you do get, resulting in terminating or recurring decimals. All right? So for example, this question here, I need to put 0 point. Now, 40, which number times by 7, that's roughly close to 40. Maybe try 5, all right? So that's 35, and the remainder is equal to 5. And you can continue. 7, that's 49, and the remainder is 10, and you can keep going, all right? So the next one is 1, 7, and the remainder is equal to 3. So you will get the answer is equal to 0.571, and continue. All right, so that's how you do it. Alright, now this is what we do when we can't change the denominator into a power of 10. And in that case, we just simply do, using manual calculation, you either use a long division or short division to work out the answer. But of course, eventually later on, you are allowed to use your calculator, so you can use your calculator to help you to find the answer. Alright, but you do need to know how to do it, using pen and paper methods here. Alright, that's all I want to teach you this lesson about how to convert from decimals to fractions and a fraction to decimal. Very, very useful strategy later on for us to do the question in the later stage. So make sure you know how to do it properly without the help of the calculator. Alright, I will see you in the future lessons. Alright, thank you.